Serious, what's the creepiest thing you've experienced that no one else would believe? I have two. One supernatural, one all too real. 1. I saw a shadow moving across the floor of a building I was working in. 2 issues with this shadow. The first is that, it was a perfect circle, in a brightly lit area, with no discernible source. The second, it was about an inch thick coming off the floor. 2. This chick I served while working as a waiter started stalking, and no one believed it because she was supposedly this shy and reserved girl who had never said or done anything creepy. She would leave me notes on my car windshield written in some kind of anagram-like code. She showed up at my house when I was home, claiming to be my friend and saying I had asked her to pick something up for me. My mother's mom sense blared a foghorn at that, because I never ask friends for anything. That finally ended when one of my coworkers witnessed her digging through a trash can out back after I had thrown my lunch away and tossed the to-go box into the can. And yes, she ate my leftovers, out of the trash. The scary part is when I tried to get a restraining order the first time, the male judge asked me why I didn't just return her affections, since she was clearly interested. Second judge, a woman, granted me a 500-foot restraining order. I've been stalked by a guy for at least 4 years now. He was an older male who had been coming into my workplace for a very long time, so everyone knew him. He got free drinks and would help the bartender with cleaning the drink glasses and generally helping around. He came off as very harmless. So, I happened to be fighting with my boyfriend and staying at my sister's house for a while. I don't drive and needed a ride to the store a few times, and he happened to live nearby. So, I had him take me to the store. This resulted in him falling in love with me. He was pissed when I went back home to my boyfriend a week later and had me suspended from work for 6 months because of it. That was 4 years ago, and he still stalks me. We moved across town, and he would demand our mutual friends to tell him where I lived. He would walk into my husband's work and pretend to do business with them. I blocked him from all my social media, and even his immediate family members got blocked just in case. He still found ways to see my Facebook. I would be working, and he would say to me randomly, "I saw that comment you made on Jill's status." Then he would pull out his phone and show me screenshots of my status, photos, and comments. He would tell me my husband would leave me soon. He would talk badly about him any chance he got. He would get drunk and drive around town trying to find my house. Then it escalated. We bought a house 2 years ago in another city, and he found out where I lived. He would drive past my house and sit on my block, just watching the house and seeing who was coming and going. Meanwhile, rarely anyone would take me seriously. I had proof of everything that was happening, including multiple other women coming forward that worked with me currently or in the past, saying he also misread their kindness and ended up stalking them for not wanting to be with him. I still got looked at like I must have led him on. That I must have done something to cause it. Our one mutual friend actually said it wasn't stalking, that driving past my house at 2 a.m. and then texting me demanding to know why someone's car is in my driveway, isn't considered stalking. No one else believes me outside of the 3 other people that were there. 3 stories, same group of people each time. 1. We went to a local graveyard around midnight. On the walk back to the car, my shoulders kept burning, but I shrugged it off. Anyway, in the car, we hooked the recorder up to the O and drive down to a train station while listening to the recording. At one point, I had asked, "Do you want us to leave you alone?" And there was a reply as loud as day saying, "Yes, mother." I don't know. We all freak out a little, because who doesn't like to be scared? As we're giggling and squealing with spooky delight, I pull into the train station. By now, both of my shoulders were absolutely on fire. I've burnt myself with hair bleach, and the sensation was like that. I shrugged off my jacket and asked everyone if I had been bitten by some bugs or something. They get quiet for a moment before someone in the back seat says, "Dude, pasta. You have handprints on your shoulders." This was around when the first iPhones came out, so someone snapped the picture, that I've since lost to the ages, and you could clearly see the outline of a hand on either shoulder, palms on the bottom by my shoulder blade, thumbs pointing to my spine, 4 fingers wrapping over my shoulders. 10 out of 10, super creepy. We were also attacked by a lone bat that night, and I accidentally scared everyone with my car. All in all, good night. 2. The same group of people, as I said above. We were driving out in the middle of the desert at midnight, because we were stupid, taking dirt roads, and just talking shit. Anyway, a friend of mine says she has to pee, but had never peed out in the middle of nowhere. I had a vague idea of where we were since my dad liked random dirt road trips too, and we had been to this area before. So, I drive us towards an outhouse. It's literally a cinder block building with a toilet over a deep concrete-lined hole. As we drive up to the area, which is sort of like a dirt cul-de-sac surrounded by large boulders and grass, I see the outhouse. but I also see a guy sitting on the rocks near it. Here are the facts. Middle dot, it's midnight. Middle dot, in the middle of the desert. Middle dot, there are no other cars in this parking area. Middle dot, the guy was in a suit. I pull forward more, slowly starting my turn because we are all a little creeped out, when this guy gets up and disappears into the bush and beyond my headlights. We're still wrestling with whether or not we want to stop. We had two very large beefy guys stuffed in my car, so we felt we'd be okay if this was homeless desert squatter or something, when the guy shows back up, just standing in my lights watching out the car. Then a few more guys in suits pop out of the bush. They're all carrying some sort of larger rifle. Nope. 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 I hit the gas, turned hard, probably sprayed them with rocks and dust, and took off. We drove for 30 minutes, all dead quiet until my friend broke the silence and said she still had to pee. She learned to pee off the side of the road that day, and years later, I learned there is supposedly a Scientology camp thing out in this desert. 2 out of 10. Not the type of scare or thrill I enjoy. 3. Again, driving in the middle of the desert, taking random dirt roads. We're miles from anything, even light pollution was minimal, when we came across some guy walking around carrying a shovel. I noped out of there real fast. Also found a random graveyard out in the desert off of a dirt road, a good 30-minute drive from civilization. That was spooky. We've driven the almost cliffside roads of Sequoia, but that was more breathtaking than spooky. We found natural lakes nowhere that were crystal clear. Basically, none of us wanted to stay still, but had obligations that kept us near home, so we pushed our boundaries and drove all over California. It was a fun summer. I will swear by this until the day I die. When I was a kid, I was riding my bike on some hills next to a bayou with my brother. I crashed at the bottom of one, and while trying to straighten my handlebars, a little girl with a German Shepherd was standing on the hill. She had just come down and asked what we were doing there. We said, just riding, and she said we shouldn't be there because a little girl was killed over there and pointed into the grass. We looked, she was gone. We ran to the top of the hill, and there was nothing. It was about 75 yards of open space to the road and fence. Ghost or a brilliant prank pulled off by someone that never took credit for it. This is so funny to me because I have a very similar story from my childhood, except I was definitely the weird little girl. Growing up, there was a small pond, reed puddle, in our neighborhood that was covered in lily pads. Afraid I'd get too close and fall in, my mother told me about a little girl who had drowned in a similar pond by her, my mother's, childhood home. Having absolutely no sense of time, assuming my mother had lived in our current house her entire life, and being just a generally creepy kid, this story fascinated me and did the exact opposite of what my mother wanted it to do. I assumed the pond she was talking about was the pond in our current neighborhood, and that a kid had actually died there. Convinced I'd get the chance to see something out of scary stories to tell in the dark, I would take our German Shepherd out to this pond, for company and protection from ghosts, and literally sit for hours hoping something spooky would happen. And anytime someone came by, I'd tell them the whole story and that I was waiting for the dead kid to show up. I do a lot of backcountry hiking. To the point where I should be the only person for at least 50 miles. I was sitting around my fire and watching a movie on my tablet, and I thought I was hearing background music, but when I turned the movie off, I could hear someone singing. Not loud and not far away. Freaked me out. My wife just laughed at me. When I was 15, I was upstairs laying on my bed reading in mine, and my sister's room with my door opened only a crack. My brother was in his room with his door shut across the hall from mine. Then I hear loud, angry stomping coming up the wooden stairs, and I'm thinking, oh great, here comes Amanda having a tantrum. My 12-year-old sister would get into disagreements with my parents, and she had a huge temper. So, I look up from my book and watch the door waiting for her to burst through. I hear the stomping come all the way down the hallway, to our door, and my door flings open so hard that it hits the dresser next to it hard. But no one was there. It's all quiet. I can clearly see my brother's door is closed. I get up pretty freaked out, and I go into his room and ask him if he heard that stomping. He said no, he had earbuds in. I knew it wasn't him because, the second my door flew open, I had a clear view of his bedroom door being shut. So, I go downstairs, and I see Amanda sitting on the couch with my parents. I asked if anyone heard the stomping in the hallway upstairs, and they said no. I told them what had just happened, but of course, they didn't believe me. That house had other weird things happen while we lived there, but this one was the absolute scariest. Another time I was on the toilet upstairs, and the toilet shared the wall with a cast iron clawfoot tub. So, the toilet was right at the foot of the tub. On top of the toilet's water tank, was a thin, decorative glass bowl. So, I'm going to the bathroom, and I hear the sound of the bowl dragging across the porcelain tank. So, I look behind me, then I hear glass shattering at the other end of the tub, on the farthest end from me. It was so loud. All the little pieces were bouncing around next to the drain making all this noise. I ran out without wiping my ass. That bowl didn't just fall, it landed where the drain was like 6 feet away. Mind you, this was one of the oldest houses in town, with floors, and if you walk around upstairs, you could hear it downstairs quite loudly. Another time, during the winter, we were in the house all day. When it was time to go to bed, we went upstairs, and my dresser was tipped over, and my lamp was broken and was on the other side of the room. A dresser tipping over upstairs like that would have made the whole house thunder. We heard nothing. My siblings and I were freaked out bad by it, but why our parents blamed us, is beyond me. There was this time I walked my dogs onto a beach somewhere around midnight, and came across a strange object on the shore. It looked like an odd piece of large driftwood, but upon turning my flashlight on, I began to distinguish that it was the spine of something. No other bones nearby, just a spine. It looked very similar to a human spine, so I initially freaked out. The next day, it was gone. The tide probably took it. I saw red static creep down from the top of a building from my apartment. Big arcs of red electricity crawling their way down the side of the building. No idea what it was. When I was growing up, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Some days I could feel a cold hand touch my shoulder, sometimes even pressure like someone was leaning on it. Other times I would be woken up by it in the middle of the night. When I was in my teens, I was helping my dad remodel our house, where we found a spot in my room where somebody died and decomposed. We could tell because there was a section of floorboard underneath the carpet that was completely replaced in the center of the room. It was about 6 feet long by 4 feet wide. The icing on the cake is when we found a note hidden inside the wall that read, "He hit me, but that's okay. I still love him." We found out from a neighbor who knew the family before us. They had some serious problems. Everyone in the neighborhood knew them. They called their house the Crow's Nest because of their last name, Crow. The husband was abusive, and all 3 kids were in jail, ranging from everything from drug abuse to straight up murder. One day the husband disappears, and they find the wife dead. When we moved in, my dad told me that there were cats living in the attic. He knew this because of all the cat poop and piss he had to clean up before attempting to store stuff up there. The attic is more like a crawl space than your traditional attic with no way into it except for a ladder, so someone had to be stashing them up there, which is messed up. I grew up in this older house where an old man had died in the bathtub, and his wife, who had dementia, left him in there for 2 weeks until the neighbor smelled his body. This was 2 owners before us. Tons of weird shit would happen there, from odd water dripping sounds to the light seemingly turning on or off in the bathroom by itself. But the scariest happened to my dad in the middle of one night. And my dad is a classic blue-collar type, no-nonsense guy, who doesn't believe in this kind of shit. But anyway, the bathroom was right across from the door to the basement. My dad said he woke up and thought he heard me walking the hall, so he walked towards my room. When he got to my room, he heard footsteps coming up the basement steps. He says he could hear it very clearly. 1 step at a time, a slow but very measured pace, just like someone sneaking up the stairs. There was one of those rods you use to hang curtains or whatever sitting there, so he picked it up. He said he heard the last couple steps, then the non-mistakable sound of a hand grabs the doorknob. He says he remembers thinking, "Okay, here we go. If I can fight this person off, I'll be able to protect my family. If not." And then nothing. He gave it a few seconds and then grabbed the doorknob and threw it open. Nothing. He said he didn't sleep the rest of the night. I have a couple that I have told, but we will go with this one. My father calls me his godsend, you know, like that movie where the kid dies but comes back? Well, he had a son before me who passed away from a fire. I should also include that I never met my dad's father and barely his mother. They were both heavy smokers and passed away. Well, I always feel like there is someone with me, like someone watching me or over me. But I'm superstitious and believe it is that junk. One night I was on the phone with my long-distance girlfriend. It was probably about 3 a.m, my dad was asleep, and no one else was there but us. I'm just laying there talking, but I get this really intense smell of cigarette smoke. No one smokes in my immediate family, but I had smelled it before in similar scenarios, so I didn't think anything of it. Although I was explaining that to my girlfriend, talking about how it kinda concerned me. Well, about that time, my phone goes silent, then to static, and I hear a deep raspy voice say, "I'm not evil." Then silence for a minute. My heart was pounding, and my girlfriend was just talking away, so I asked if she heard that, and she was confused. I could never convince her about what happened, but I'm not insane. I was at a club in Los Angeles and suddenly was stricken with absolute terror. I started shaking, and my fight, flight, faint kicked into high gear. I found the people I came with and told them I needed to leave immediately. 2 minutes down the road, we got nailed by a drunk driver and our car flipped over and landed in the ditch upside down. None of the first responders thought there would be a single survivor, but we were all totally unscathed. The man who hit us was named Booze. Yes, that's the most unbelievable part of this story, and we were told he would not make it, but I have never verified if he died. In short, this is why I have a really difficult time with the concept that we have any control over our lives. That awful thing I felt would happen, wouldn't have happened if we had stayed at the club. When my son was about 3, he was having trouble falling asleep, so I led him into our bed to look at his books, hoping that would make him sleepy. My husband was asleep, and I was reading a book. My son starts reading his book aloud. It was a new book I hadn't read to him yet, and he was 3, he couldn't read. I asked him how he knew the words, and he said, "John is telling me who the hell is John. The boy that lives in my closet." Holy shit. Freaked me out. Over the next year, he would mention John occasionally. There were a few weird things that happened that I witnessed, like blinds rattling when no windows were open. It eventually stopped, but my son, now 15, refuses to go into his old nursery. He doesn't remember John, but that room creeps him out. We use it for storage now. Honestly, I don't like going in there, either. When I was in 8th grade, I lived in downtown Jacksonville for a few months attending online school. I always had a weird feeling in our place but dismissed it because we lived in a pretty safe neighborhood. One night I had a really weird dream about how this Middle Eastern man in his mid-20s approached me, telling me that my family was in danger and that I needed to leave. Since it was a dream, it was a little hard to focus, so he kept repeating himself, but each time, he was getting increasingly louder until all he was screaming was for me to wake up. My eyes jolted open, and when I went to sit up, I immediately froze because towering over me was this filthy old man in his 50s or 60s watching me with a blank expression. I knew that part wasn't a dream because we were like that for a while until he kinda disappeared and then materialized in my doorway, still watching me. I looked away for a second to turn on my lamp, but when I looked back, he was gone. I slept in either my mom's bed or the couch after that.